We have to shift the definition of legacy from preservation to preparation and value creation to preparing the next generation to create value. Maybe not even in your business, because that legacy is not about you. It's about them. And the problem that we have with the traditional model of legacy planning and legacy idea is that we are inherently or maybe subconsciously making that legacy about us while also saying it's about the future.
Welcome to Startup Spouses, where we help entrepreneurial couples take their relationship from mediocre to mind-blowing. I'm Marie, a relationship and sex coach.
I'm Adam, and I am a business coach.
So, today is the day we talk about legacy.
We got to say it like it's like your cinematic.
Okay.
Right? Say, today we're going to talk about legacy. It is your legacy. Yes. So we are going to talk about legacy today. That's a big loaded, like full on, like, word that has a lot of meanings.
Well, considering it really doesn't bother me because maybe I haven't experienced this whole legacy, the passing down generation sort of thing. My family is not involved in a family business. Right. So it's not very loaded for me. So in this episode, I would love to hear your thoughts on it too, because I'm very curious of what you have to say about legacy.
Yeah, sure. There's a story there. I mean, coming from a family business background, there's obviously a lot of history that I have with legacy, and I think the reason that I want to share this here, or we want to talk about this here, because if you're building a business and a relationship, and you want to make that relationship and the business great, a lot of times that conversation is going to come in is like, okay, well, how obviously does our family play into it? How does the next generation play into it? And how do we pass on what we have to the next generation? And these are all like concepts that are broadly expressed in the term legacy. And like anything else that is driven by kind of business or anything like that, legacy has become an industry. Yeah. And a lot of times when we talk about legacy in the family business circles or the or just the individual entrepreneurial circle, when you're Gen 1, we're talking about legacy. Legacy just has a lot of different meanings depending on who you're talking to. Yeah. To a tax advisor, legacy planning is about the best tax strategy, weirdly, which I don't understand that at all. But like in family business centers across the country, one of the things that's most talked about when I've gone into these like family business centers is tax strategy, and they talk about it like it's legacy. It's just taxes. I mean, part of it is like, yeah, I understand you want to save as much money as possible and have a strategy for that with taxes, but it's kind of like that's not your legacy. And same with estate planning. Estate planning is just like kind of you get an attorney to basically protect your assets in terms of like if you pass away, where it goes, all this kind of stuff. And people call that legacy. Yeah. But we're still talking about like material things. And 90% of the discussion that drives legacy now, and especially when founders get dragged into it, or when we're talking to family businesses or things like that, whether it's a first generation family or a fifth generation family or a 50th generation family. A lot of times when they're talking about legacy, it's about like, oh, we need to do estate planning and succession planning and tax strategy and all this kind of stuff. And we need to make sure that we're preserving the wealth for the next generation. But you know what's not talked about?
What?
You know who's not involved in those discussions?
Who?
The next generation.
What?
Yeah, I know.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So
I feel like you, for those people out there who talk about legacy, and why I feel like it's important to have this discussion today, is the fact that you have a different view on it.
Well, I have a different perspective.
Yeah, different perspective on it because of the fact that you have been in this fourth generation company. Yeah. So you have a very unique maybe difference, and people might have feelings about it. But the best thing to do in this is to listen and just take it in and understand it. So
Right, right.
I mean, you've told me your perspective, but I would love for you to share it with everybody else too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll share our story, and a lot of what I'm going to say is going to sound maybe that I'm like poo-pooing the idea of legacy, and I'm really not. I actually I actually love the idea of legacy. I just define it very differently from how other people define it.
Yes.
Because of where I came from. I have this unique perspective of being on the opposite end of the legacy discussion. You know, my great grandfather started our family business back in 1923. I was literally born into it. You know, obviously born of the third generation, so I'm a fourth generation family member in this business.
Yeah.
And so I grew up like basically hearing about the family business, you know, seeing my dad go to the business, and all of this stuff revolving around family and business was enmeshed. And we've talked about that in the past. And the reason I think we want to share it here is because if a lot of people listening to this show are going to be entrepreneurial couples, meaning you're the founding generation, you are the generation one.
Yes.
And your perspective, a lot of times in the terms of legacy, is you're building value in this business. You're creating something that has enormous amounts of value.
Yeah.
Which is great. Keep doing that. And then but a lot of first generation family members that are thinking about like, well, maybe I want to pass this on to my kids one day, are thinking about it from the perspective of I want something that is going to help, you know, give my kids security, give the generation security. And if you're really thinking very, very forward, you're like, I want to provide something that lasts for generations, so that my family and my heirs, like way down the line, are going to have something that can take care of them.
That sounds like wonderful. That sounds like something that you are so loving and caring, and you're giving, you're thinking about your future generations of giving them something that, you know, they might not have that advantage.
Yeah.
So what is the problem?
Right. Well, it is a very noble pursuit.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. It
pursuit.
sounds amazing.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think that there was any issues with that.
Right. I mean, you wouldn't think so. I mean, it's a very noble idea. Like, want to protect my family and all of this kind of stuff. But let's take it from the perspective of let's just share the data really quick. So family businesses out there make up something like 60% of the total GDP, the United States GDP, right? I think something around like the idea of 80% of businesses are privately owned family kind of businesses, or they're privately owned businesses. And of that, a large percentage of those are family businesses. But 60% of the US GDP, it's not, you know, public companies or things like that, even though that's how we measure our economy, and that's totally BS. We shouldn't be measuring the quality of our economy by how great the S&P is. We should be measuring it based on how privately held companies are doing in our economy. That's the real, and many of those are family owned, whether they're mom and pop shops, you know, which is obviously ultimately startup spouses, really, or it could be multi-generational family businesses. So that's a big portion of our economy that are, you know, family businesses. Now, of family businesses that are out there, I think 2007 was the last time we reported on this, but there's something like 1.7 million companies as of that time that are actually spousal owned, meaning husband and wife or spouses are actually running a company together.
Yeah.
That's probably gone way up because that was 20 years ago, and we've gone through things like a great pandemic, which brought a lot of spouses started working together after that. And so of other multi-generational family businesses, here's some more statistics. I know if I'm boring you, I'm sorry, but this is really important. 60% of the wealth of a family, 60% of businesses will not pass down to the second generation.
How many is
60%.
that? Wow.
So when you're a family business and you're thinking, I want to pass this down to my kids, 60% of you, 6 out of 10 companies, will not pass down to the second generation for a variety of reasons. Yes. 90%, you know, something like 90% will not pass on to the third.
Wow.
And that number only goes up. So I came from a background of a fourth generation, right? So we did everything right, and there was no dysfunction whatsoever, and everybody did great. We're all wealthy and living high on the hog. That is absolutely not the case, actually. Yeah, but I think the point is that, you know, of those, that's the statistics. The chances of you actually under traditional models passing on your business to your kids it's just not going to happen. Those statistics kind of mirror the wealth transfer as well. Meaning, there's a term that's called shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Meaning, something like 90% of families will not see. So if you're a first generation family that's generated a large amount of wealth,
Yeah.
by generation 3, that wealth will be lost in 90% of families.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why do we focus so much on legacy then?
Because we want to beat the odds. We're different. We're terminally unique.
Do you think that focusing on legacy helps to bridge that gap of first to second to third generation, or?
I think that there's a belief that we will, but my opinion is that we don't have the data to support it yet, because we've been studying this for many decades, but the statistics haven't changed that dramatically. And so we don't know if those shifts that we're making to succession and governance planning and all this kind of stuff work. And the legacy discussions that we're having are all around estate planning and tax strategies, governance structures, succession planning, all this kind of stuff. And we know that may be important, but I think it's missing a very, very important part. And this is where it comes into my story and the story that I hear from next gen leaders all over, because ever since I left my family business, I've been talking to next gen leaders and hearing their frustrations and hearing all of this stuff. And I know that this is a big void. The legacy discussions typically don't talk about the relational aspects of legacy and where our priorities lie when we're doing it. So to give you context, I'm going to talk a little bit about my story from being on the other end of legacy. So I was born into this family business, right? 4th generation family business started by my great grandfather. He had 4 sons. Those 4 sons, he gave the company to those 4 sons equally. So each of them owned 25%. That was the first mistake. And I can't fault my great grandfather for that, because we didn't know anything about legacy back in 1923 or 1930. And so the thought was that, like, yeah, my kids are going to take it over. But the truth of the matter is, most of those 4 brothers didn't really want the company. They just were forced to take it.
Yeah.
They were forced by dad to come in and take it. And then of course it passed on to the next generation, and then there were 60 family member owners. And so this was kind of the legacy of my great grandfather. Now I've met my great grandfather once when I was 5 years old, I think, or I don't know how many times I met him, but the last time I saw him, I was 5 years old.
Yes.
The only memory that I have of my great grandfather was of this imposing man in a hallway with a hat on, and that was it.
Yeah.
That's when I picture my great grandfather. That's what I see, and this is the person whose legacy I was tasked with preserving, because it was all about, in this business, preserving that legacy at all costs.
Yeah.
And the legacy was basically C.B. Hill's legacy. And so by the time it got to the 4th generation, this person that I never knew became mythologized.
You're asking the wrong person to.
I don't know how to say that word, but it became mythology, really.
Yes.
Like, he had this grand vision for a great company that was going to take care of his family for generations, and a lightning bolt came down and struck a rock, and it became our core values and our creed and all this kind of stuff. And we were tasked with just preserving the legacy of C.B. Hill for future generations. And this is an important distinction on the legacy discussion. We want to preserve a legacy for future generations. Think about that statement for a moment.
That is interesting, because what exactly is the purpose? You're preserving the legacy. What does that exactly mean? What is even taking what he did,
right,
and continuing it on? Well, isn't there's like that saying, if it's broke, don't fix it, sort of thing? Does it seem like that way, and that's why people passed it on? Was it kind of like wow, this is working, so let's keep going with it. What could be wrong in that instance?
Well, I think that when we think about that whole statement of like we want to preserve a legacy for future generations, it's kind of there's a duality to that statement that doesn't quite fit because what that essentially means is, hey, we're going to take what was created and make sure we keep it as it is, preserve it, so that future generations can thrive. What that means is that essentially what you said. We don't want to break that model that originally worked. But the problem is that things evolve over time. And when we talk about legacy as preservation, that's where we fail. That's what I believe that's where a lot of companies fail because instead of that value creation that helped the first generation to thrive, we're no longer focused on value creation. We're focused on preservation.
Yeah.
And if you follow the money, with estate planners, tax strategists, all these people that are defining what legacy is for us, what they're doing is their rally cry is preserve your wealth, preserve it at all costs. And there's nothing wrong with preserving your principal. I mean, that's a key concept of Warren Buffett. But also, if you're not creating new value, you are bound for obsolescence, especially when, as your family grows through generations, as we experienced in our company, your family grows exponentially, not linearly.
Yes.
If you're preserving something, you're only going to grow at a certain level that's probably going to equate to the level of inflation or however you're investing those funds. And over the longer term, that's going to level out at a linear growth pattern. So you can't succeed unless you're creating new value.
What I'm hearing, though, is you're with that preservation, keeping things the same, there's no room for growth. That means there's no innovation happening.
Right.
That you're continuing to have the same mindset, the mind frame. But, and I say but because there's changes, there's innovation of technology, there's changes all over the place. We know more about the mental health. We know about the human body.
Right.
So, and what we can do, but keeping your mindset in the same mentality of somebody who had it 100 years ago, that's frightening.
Right.
Like, what was your experience?
Yeah.
What is your experience with that, though?
Yeah, no, great question. I love the fact that you use the word mindset.
Yeah.
Because what legacy really is from a relational perspective is mindset. And what we're passing on to the next generations is a mindset. So my experience was exactly that. I was born into a mindset. Preserve this, legacy, preserve what this is. Then coming into the company, that was kind of the thing. We've got to preserve it, don't break it. And so my mindset became, all right, preservation versus value creation. Because new value creation or innovation would be frightening. That would disrupt the system. That would change things. And we couldn't do that because we can't disrupt a legacy that we're trying to preserve for this person. Then when I became the CEO of the company, this is where I really started to see the transactional nature of family business that's associated with one singular entity. And this is another challenge that I want to really challenge first generation entrepreneurs on, is this idea that you want to build a business that can be sustainable for generations to come to take care of your family. I mean, that's a rare unicorn, as we already know, which is over 90% don't pass on to go to the third generation. And there are examples of those that do. You can see a lot of those kinds of examples but they are unicorns. They really are. And sustaining that really means that you're having to create this identity around that singular business. And that's really what happened to me. My identity got shaped around this singular business. My identity got shaped around the role that I played in that business. And the idea of this business was so important to our family that it became almost deified. It became like, we cannot lose this because it is everything to us. Like the loss of that business would have been catastrophic to the nature of our family, not just right now, but throughout our history.
Yeah, well, it makes complete sense though that they like with that preservation became this surrounding of fear and anxiety.
Right.
From my perspective of working with people in relationships, that fear wrapped around that preservation kept and not thinking outside the box, because as soon as you thought outside the box, you're different. You need to exit here because we need to keep things the same. Kind of like, you know how, I don't know if baseball players do this anymore because I don't really follow it. Sorry. But you know, like how they have that, if they wore these certain pair of socks or they didn't shave that day and they won. So they thought, oh my gosh, I cannot shave.
Right.
Because
Like
I'm going to break superstition.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was trying to get to that, and I couldn't remember the word for it. But superstition, like that superstition, it's almost kind of like that in a way. It's because if I have to keep these socks on no matter what, no matter how stinky, dirty, how they're falling off, I don't wash them. They stay on my feet, and or I do not shave, and it's going to be like this.
Right.
Other cut their hair. So I'm assuming that still happens because, you know, I see that a lot.
Yeah.
I see that. But it's kind of that superstition.
Yeah.
You think I've never thought of it that way though.
It's partly, it's like superstition that's grounded in evidence that something worked in the past. And we call those in business, or in especially legacy business, we call those sacred cows. The longer your business is in business without check, those sacred cows become more and more. I mean, those sacred cows can be values that you once had that don't serve you anymore. They could be people in your company that you have to keep employed that are untouchable, like family members, because God forbid you disrupt the family harmony or anything like that. It could be just maintaining artificial harmony, even though you know something's under the surface. And those kinds of things happen when you introduce family dynamics in the business. And that idea of the mindset around legacy, imagine the weight. That is, when you're in a multi-generational family business, way down the line where this legacy has been, quote unquote, successful for generations, and you make it to the fourth generation, then a fourth generation leader comes in with all of these sacred cows, all of these like preconditions for existence that other companies don't have, by the way. Like they don't impose these self-imposed boundaries or limits on themselves that are irrational and unreasonable. In order and have these, it's just like an additional hurdle that you have to overcome in order to survive another generation, every single generation, when it's just tied to this one thing. And then there's 60 family member owners, everyone who has a different opinion on the way things go. And so when I initially came into the business, we were losing money. Yeah. We were on the verge of insolvency. We were on the verge of the big bad B word, bankruptcy, which to me was, I grew up believing that was a death sentence. In my nervous system, that was a death sentence. And the trauma that came from that, which, I mean, I know this sounds severe, but when you think about being ousted from your tribe, your family, or even your family being completely dismantled, your community being dismantled, that is a capital T trauma. Yeah. And that is what a lot of next-gen leaders are going through, because of the imposed obligation of legacy that was, yes, intended as in good intent, but became an obligation because they felt an obligation to continue on what you're doing, what you were doing, without changing it. This is why we have to be careful with legacy, with the idea of legacy. This is why we can't just attach it to things like estate planning and tax planning. This is why we have to shift the definition of legacy from preservation to preparation and value creation, to preparing the next generation to create value. Maybe not even in your business, because that legacy is not about you. It's about them. And the problem that we have with the traditional model of legacy planning and legacy idea is that we are inherently or maybe subconsciously making that legacy about us, while also saying it's about the future. That whole statement of we have to preserve the legacy for the benefit of future generations, you're making it about you. You're making it about you when you're going to be dead and gone. And you're not going to matter anymore. That's an incredibly ego-driven pursuit to think about legacy, about how you want to leave a legacy or this. Make the legacy that you leave about preparing the next generation to live into whatever options that they want, whether it's working as a doctor, whether it's starting their own business. What if you created what if you created this business that you're creating now to be a vehicle, not for them to take over and continue, but a vehicle for them to basically fund whatever they want to do.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Like
Yeah.
it opens the door to many possibilities
Right.
for our children.
Right.
It makes them not only like, oh my gosh, I don't have to do this. I don't have to I don't find this exciting or, fulfilling. I want to fulfill my life some other way. And it just opens that door for them to have that broader view of innovation, exploration, and probably gives them a little bit more confidence to do something that's not connected with you. And I mean, that sounds amazing, I think, but my curiosity, and I don't know if you can be in the mindset of this, but our understanding of this, of why people are so entrenched of passing it on, like having something that is theirs that they need to give to their children, and they work in the business to do it.
I don't know. I mean, I think everybody has their own reasons. And I mean, I tend to think that there's always good intent behind it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you think about all of these elements of, and I think of legacy, it's not just about leaving a business or material things behind. It's like values and vision and all this kind of stuff. And I think what it comes down to though is when we're trying to pass on, our version of what values are. Like, hear this all the time about what are our family values. It's like, how do you know what your kids' values are? Like, inherently in their core, how can you impose values on them? I mean, yes, you could teach them the basics of morality and all of this kind of stuff, but generally speaking, they're going to have their own values. Yeah. They're going to maybe want something different. They might have different views or politics than you will, even despite like how they've come up. And I think to the extent that it's healthy, we should embrace a lot of that. And if we're not doing that, well, again, it goes back to this idea of control. Legacy is control. And think about if you're first generation and thinking about this, because sadly, I've seen it a lot in companies that I work with, because I work with a lot of family businesses where there's a senior generation that founded a company or something like that. And there's so much control in this legacy idea that's veiled in this assumption that you're doing right by your kids to give them something that will help them. But have you ever asked like the next generation or assumed they're capable of like doing something on their own?
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the biggest fears that I had of leaving our family business. Even though I had a lot of success leading it through a lot of those very challenges, building $40 million in revenue on top of that to actually turn the company around, having all of this, success in terms of turning around this cruise ship of a legacy family business with 150 employees and lots of history in sacred cows. I had this fear that I wasn't good enough because I was always led to believe that this family business was really the only thing that was worth me, or that I was like, that I could work in.
Well,
and
it
that
makes
was
sense.
Yeah, and that's true of I just see it time and time again where there's a matriarch or a patriarch of a family that is just imposing control on their family under the veil of building a legacy that they can eventually take on. But what they're not doing is preparing the next generation. They're just putting them in seats, or they're saying like, wait your turn, pay your dues, making positions for them so that they're sitting in a seat for a while until some magical thing happens where suddenly they're prepared. But they're not actively preparing the next generation. That's a big failure of the baby boomer generation in family business. I see it time and time again. They're not preparing the next generation to do anything, no direction, just putting them in a seat and saying, you'll learn from somebody.
Why do you think that is happening? That's what I'm so curious about. That they're not preparing you, because I mean, if you think about it, working in a business, and let's just take me as a manager, and we're always having assistant managers, and
Right.
one day that they can prepare to go and move up into the systems. So we're always teaching how to do our job position, and it seems counterintuitive when you get into a family business that they just put you in a spot and just kind of like leave you there until, and then is it kind of it's like, are they testing you, or are they trying to see who they want to lead the company, and they can't make a decision, or they don't want to make a decision because it would affect the other siblings, or I don't know.
I mean, that's part of it too. I mean, if you have multiple siblings, there's only so many people that can run the business.
Yeah.
And there's only so many people that can do certain things. And when you're in a business, and if you're not operating under an operating system that has the right set of like rules and criteria, well, then you're creating positions for people that don't exist, and you're not really providing meaning to people. There's something that I like to, when I'm doing this talk on legacy, is I've delivered this talk in front of many audiences in terms of how to prepare that when you're an early generation. Because I want to emphasize again that you, as the entrepreneurial generation who are working together as startup spouses, are the initial value builder generation. If you can focus on building up next gens and the next generation as being their own generation one, then that's a good mindset to set up here. Are you treating legacy as something you have to preserve, something that you're building that you want preserved for eternity just because it's some kind of ego-driven pursuit on you? Or are you truly wanting the next generation to thrive? If that's the case, treat that legacy as preparing them to be value creators with their own agency.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And that could be completely independent of what you're doing.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about this, and it's great to come hear your background from being a fourth generation family business, and it's like that's great, but I'm just starting my business. It's like a lot of people are just starting their business, trying to even make it their own in this case, and going through all that stress of beginning something, and it's like, that's great and all. You're third, fourth generation. That's not something I think about. So why is it important for these us like startup spouses to start thinking about legacy? When is it appropriate to start thinking about it? And when are we having those conversations around it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Is I think that's something that hasn't been emphasized within the academic centers or when we talk about family business. I've read many volumes of family business books that talk about like, hey, how to operate a family business, and they don't talk about like when to start preparing or talking about legacy, or they say talk about it in terms of like, hey, yeah, you gotta continue on with the traditional model that doesn't work. It's all BS. Yeah. I mean, sorry, but I think that I think, here's my opinion on this and how I think we're training our kids, or how we're helping our kids with this, is that your business that you're starting now, don't treat it as a legacy instrument. In other words, don't call it a family business.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, family can work within it, but how many of us hate, by the way, when we went into our old jobs and they said we treat each other like a family? No, that's all BS. Don't even treat your business that has family members in it like a family business, because your business should be operating like a business to start,
yes.
And your kids need to see that. because they need to know that value creation within the business and our greater economy comes first. That it is about who you know and all of this kind of stuff, but it's all about the value that you bring first and foremost. And then second to that is we're not trying to provide these conflicting messages of, hey, you all are privileged, and because we have this kind of stuff, and don't be entitled, don't do this. Yeah, I mean, call out the behaviors, but don't preempt it by like saying like, hey, when you're out there, don't go and be entitled about our family and our business and things like that, because it's going to imprint like shame on them, and it's going to imprint this conflicting message if you're simultaneously sharing, but I also want you to take it over one day. Because that in and of itself is imposing an entitlement and telling them not to be entitled. So you can't have those two things at once. You just can't.
Yeah.
And that is just another kind of shame spiral. That was a message that I received early on too. It's just like, hey, don't get this in your head, and you're probably going to take it over one day. It's like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with that information? Just feel bad about myself for being, for being in a position that you're putting me in, and like all this stuff. And also it's an obligation, and now I'm struggling with that. So don't impose those kind of identity ideas around that might impose shame onto them for something that they haven't even done yet.
Yeah.
Right. And then I think the other part is so you're not putting it out as a family business, so there's no expectation around that.
Yeah.
Right. Now you're just setting an example for them as a couple working together, as great partners, and also life partners. You're modeling this idea that you can separate business and family. So you can actually treat the family as a family and business as a business. That's a hugely valuable skill for legacy building, by the way, when you can compartmentalize those two things. And then the next thing is that how do you prepare them? And I think this comes from like ideas within the vision planning, and how you take that long-term vision and you bring it down to the ground level. We do a lot of this work in EOS in the business. I think we take this a lot into our family too.
Yeah.
Where we help them to develop that longer term vision. And when you're a kid, a long term vision is like 5 years, right? So
even less than that.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, a lot of times
4 years in high school. So.
Yeah. So a lot of the values conversations, I think, it starts with values conversations. And this doesn't mean, hey, let's here are the values we want you to have as a family. No, it's like maybe when they're young, like 8 or 9 years old, start asking them what words resonate with them with regard to values. Like, hey, there's card games out there where they could pick their favorite cards, and they start to incorporate these ideas on what they really value. And then they can start to imprint those. You don't have to like be very like, hey, make this a strategic plan or a strategic document or anything like that. But you just start having those conversations. Then when they get to become teenagers, they're starting to like freshman year of high school, they're starting to think about more about what they want to do. That's when you bring the vision stuff out. Like, what's your 5 years from now when you start college? What do you think you're studying? Again, you don't have to make it so that, hey, lock this in so that and we're going to hold you accountable. No, it's just the conversation around that. And then you bring it down to, okay, so what can you be doing in the next year, in the next 90 days to kind of move in that direction and feel it out and experience things and see how it feels.
Yeah, that exploration part of it too.
Yeah.
And also I just wanted to make sure to understand the fact that during these conversations that we're having with our children, that we're not controlling it or trying to sway their opinions. It's like, I want to be a musician. Oh, yeah, you're not going to make money that way. Like, if you're imposing your own beliefs onto your children, that it can cause a lot of shame and like them feeling that, oh, my beliefs are not enough. And it's instead of that, and try to catch yourself as much as possible, because we're all victims to it sometimes, but it's just getting curious. It's like, oh, that sounds fascinating. Okay. What do you want to do with that? Like, do you want to be at big concerts? Do you want to be at small concerts? Do you how do you see yourself in that arena, and get their minds working? It's like, and then have them explore that for themselves. Do you need singing lessons? Would you want to be I take music. I'm
Yeah.
just taking music as a thing right now. Hey, would it be fun to, be in a musical? What is that something you would be interested in? It's like
Yeah.
you keep going down the line to see, so they can get curious and not that shame. And because we all change our minds too sometimes, because we realize, okay, maybe this is not it, and I got to explore that and it was fun, and so hey, let's try to explore something else.
Right.
So getting into that mindset of doing that too
Yeah.
is really important.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. Is you're absolutely right. Don't impose your belief systems on them. I mean, I know that a lot of people are going to, really clutch their pearls and shun around that because they don't, well, what about my religion? What about all of that? You're modeling what you live. If what you're living lights them up,
Yeah.
they will find that way. And you can help to provide them direction as they're going, but you can also let them discover
Yeah.
who they are at their core, and that's part of putting your trust in the next generation to do that. I mean, parenting, obviously, like you are like, obviously trying to avoid the behaviors that are destructive or unhealthy and all of that. And that's the job, is putting those boundaries of that. But you also, you want to encourage them to discover what they need. And so that, I think, in a 45-minute kind of like nutshell, is really wrapping up, I think, what we're doing wrong with legacy, generally speaking, from a broader perspective, when we think about like how that's passing on to future generations.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of that shame that comes up in next gen leaders or next gen people. And we tend to only hear the good news about, say, family legacies that go on for generations, and we want to try and reach those, but we don't understand, or we tend not to want to believe that those are unicorns. And so if I could close out with anything, and then I'll kind of recap what the action items are from this, is that family businesses, generally speaking, and I say this as somebody who's been through a family business, who's observed family businesses and coaches family business leaders, most family businesses should not exist multi-generationally. With that said, you can be a great partner with your spouse. Your kids can be really, really great leaders or whatever they want to be in their own right, if you can help them to discover their true identity. And the way that you can do that is through those value discussions early, and helping them to discover those values for themselves, helping them to build a vision when they start to get into high school and turn it into like 90-day plans and things like that can help them move them in that direction, where they can experiment with other ideas on what they want to become, by not obligating them to a specific family business and not tying your entire family identity and wealth to a singular business, but using that business that you have, not as a family business, but as a vehicle to provide opportunities and resources to the next gen so that they can pursue what lights them up. And to make sure that you're just thinking about that legacy discussion as more than just estate planning and tax planning, but preparing the next generation instead of preserving what you've created, and hopefully, ideally, if your kids start to build their own thing with the resources that you've created through the family business or through the business that you started, and then now they're starting their own thing, maybe you could sell your successful business and use those resources to build something greater, to offer more value in the world, or sail off into the sunset and do what you want to do. So that's the discussion on legacy today, and I hope you got some value from this episode, learned a little bit about legacy. And if you like this episode and you feel that there's somebody that needs to hear it, please share it with a friend. Please subscribe and like this episode. It helps us to get the name out, the show out there, so that we could help other startup couples to build great relationships, build great businesses, and have great sex. And yeah, we appreciate you joining us today, and we hope to see you next time.